Dr. Bansi Sabu, Dr. Vasant Kumar, and Dr. Sanjay Agrawal, and all other members. So thank you very much for this. And it is such an odd time here that I'm in USA, and right now it is morning 6 o'clock. So you can understand. And after listening to the three stalwarts in the field of diabetes management in ICU and other things, I'm going to speak about some odd topic that non-critical care setting, which is also critical. Hope I'm audible, correct?
Yes, yes.
Right? Can I share my slides, please? My slides are visible now.
Yes.
Okay. So it is the hypoglycemia management in not critical care setting, not critical but critical. So there are various agenda here, and because many of the things have been talked by Dr. Divya, Dr. Navneet, and Dr. Suri, I think my task will be less, and I also would be able to spare some time for question answer session. So these are the outline. Now all of you know that diabetes and stress hyperglycemia are common in hospital settings. It is generally accepted that hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia should be avoided in hospitalized patients. And for the past 15 years, insulin therapy has been considered the cornerstone of the management of patients with hyperglycemia in the hospital. However, the practice varies widely internationally and locally, and the findings from several randomized controlled trials have shown that non-insulin drugs can have a role in the management of in patients with type 2 diabetes. So if we really summarize the previous three talks, then what is important is that I think the patients, when they are admitted, whether they are diabetic or non-diabetic, we should do a blood sugar at the time of admission along with HbA1c. Likewise, now we are also recommending all patients who are undergoing solid organ transplants, and whether they have no history of diabetes, but they should have baseline, even baseline C-peptide, HbA1c, and sugars are very important. And Dr. Sandeep and Dr. Navneet, they both have shown that the newly discovered hyperglycemia patients are having highest mortality in comparison to patients without diabetes and patients with non-diabetes. So that is a very important point which we must keep it in mind. The growing prevalence of diabetes and increased longevity escalate the burden of inpatient dysglycemia, affecting nearly all areas of hospital care. Suboptimal glycemic control in hospital is associated with adverse clinical outcomes and prolonged length of stay, delayed wound healing, and all other things are known. Inpatient hyperglycemia represents a considerable portion of national and international healthcare expenditure related to diabetes, and there are growing concerns about the safety and quality of inpatient hyperglycemia management as staffing levels are being stretched while the prevalence and complexity of the cases increase. So numerous observational studies have shown that hyperglycemia increases poor clinical outcomes. Treatment of hyperglycemia is associated with decreased mortality and morbidity among the hospitalized patient. However, hypoglycemia is also equally important, and which has been stressed and focused often in this symposium. Therefore, guidelines recommend avoiding iatrogenic hypoglycemia, and thus hospitalized patients with diabetes require glycemic control with low glycemic variability to prevent both hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia. All of us heard that the major guidelines, including the NICE guidelines, now recommend the safe glucose level between 140 milligram to 180 milligram per deciliter without hypoglycemia in non-critical hospitalized patients. Glycemic variability is also very important. We should keep it in mind. Most instances, hospital setting, insulin is the preferred treatment of glycemic control that is recommended that most critically ill patients receive insulin infusion therapy. That is what Sandeep has said. And in non-critically ill patients receive basal bolus therapy. However, the basal bolus regimen is also associated with good control, but there is an increased high risk of hypoglycemia. And I'll just show you some of the studies where it has been mentioned. Hypoglycemia has been reported in 12 to 32% of the patients with type 2 diabetes in general medicine and surgery who were treated with basal bolus insulin regime. The use of oral anti-diabetic drugs is generally not recommended for patients admitted in hospital because of paucity of data on their safety and efficacy. As such, the safety and efficacy of non-insulin anti-hyperglycemic therapies in hospital settings are areas of active research. Current scenario, diabetes technology is rapidly evolving. The preliminary data have shown that feasibility for inpatient use of continuous glucose monitoring devices and automated insulin delivery system has been taking place very rapidly. Of course, not in our setup, but in Western setup. And the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that use of technology in the hospital setting is very important, because many a times in this situation, patients have to be treated remotely from the station without touching them, or doing the frequent blood glucose pricking and other things are not possible. So the recommendations are, despite paucity of good quality evidence in inpatient management of diabetes, several international guidelines were developed to guide practice. Because of the evidence has often been inadequate to determine how best manage different aspects of inpatient care, these guidelines often have a large element of consensus-based medicine, and with recommendation from the medical societies that often reach different conclusions, with the most notable differences related to glucose targets and use of non-insulin glucose lowering drugs. International variations practice differ. Although the use of insulin therapy in hospital is common in US and Canada, the use of non-insulin agents such as metformin and sulfonylureas are relatively common in other countries like UK, India, and Israel. So what are the pharmacological management of hyperglycemia? So as mentioned earlier, the continuous insulin infusion therapy is the preferred regime for ICU patients with hyperglycemia, including those without a diagnosis of diabetes, and for most patients with hyperglycemic crisis. But one point is there that frequent monitoring of blood sugar, which has been mentioned here, that if patient is conscious and if you are going to do 1 hourly blood sugar monitoring with the glucometers, the pricking of fingers are very difficult on long run, and this may not be a question of a day or two, but couple of days, then that makes a little inhuman in doing this frequent monitoring. US and UK professional societies have produced algorithm for intravenous insulin management, which has been mentioned earlier, and generally patients with moderate to severe diabetic ketoacidosis should be treated with continuous IV insulin infusion. So one point where I would like to say that all algorithm should be according to your infrastructure, your facility, your staff, and your doctors on duty. Then you can do a better algorithms and better management of these things. Another important thing which we usually should keep it in mind, that hypokalemia is common about 50% during treatment, and therefore careful monitoring of potassium concentration is recommended, and a systemic assessment of modification practice is warranted. The ischemic event patients, rapid control of glucose values might be warranted in view of known potential harm associated with hyperglycemia. However, attempts to lower glucose concentration intensively have not shown additional benefit and might increase the risk of hypoglycemia. And so, as mentioned earlier, targeting a lower glucose range is opposed to a conventional range of 140 to 180 milligram may improve the clinical outcomes in the cardiac settings, except in certain CABG patients, you may have a little tighter control. You can still use a computerized algorithm that minimizes the risk of iatrogenic hypoglycemia, because many factors are taken into consideration for a computerized algorithms. As earlier mentioned, the transitions from the patients who are close to discharge, we must remember that those patients who were on basal bolus therapy, whether you should continue the same treatment or whether you should switch over to the oral drugs, which patients were before admission. All these things will depend upon the type of the patient you are treating. And most of the times, those patients who have undergone surgery, or those who have recovered from COVID, or those who have a wound healing pending and all this, I think it is always better to continue insulin, because this insulin is a anabolic hormone, not only controlling the diabetes, but it also improves the patient's health. So once patients are off the hook from the doctors, like they have no dressing required, no uh, other things are required, patient's diet is full, activity is full, then you can change over to the other previous regimes which patients are taking. So this is an algorithm which is self-deprecatory. You can see here that mild, moderate, and severe hypoglycemia, how will you deal with which whether it is mild hyperglycemia, you can consider low dose basal insulin with OAD or OAD. If it is a moderate hypoglycemia, basal insulin with or without correction, nutritional insulin. And you can start with low dose to depending upon the patient's obesity, insulin resistance, and kind of illness. And especially remember one thing, when patients are admitted, they will have another things like they may start with steroids, they may have surgical stress, they may have drugs like antiretroviral therapy, or they are on vasopressors, which are all most of the times are anti-insulin and will need the requirement of insulin. So you must remember. And those patients who are severe hyperglycemic, above 300 milligram range, these patients are ideal for basal bolus therapy. As mentioned by Dr. Sanjay, critically ill patients or hyperglycemic patients, you need to do medical and surgical patients 100 to 180, continuous infusion, severe DKA, again you need a continuous infusion, mild to moderate DKA, you can have subcutaneous insulin with DKA protocol and other things which have been mentioned often. Various regimes with human analogs insulin formulation administered subcutaneously have been tested in non-critically ill patients with type 2 diabetes. So non-critically ill patients can have point of care glucose monitoring, and they may have basal plus boluses, or basal plus boluses, or premix insulin for the control of diabetes if they are predictable in their diet. Insulin regime, subcutaneous sliding scale insulin or the correctional insulin used to treat hyperglycemia after it has already occurred is widely used in some of the hospitals despite the condemnation by many clinical guidelines. The use of sliding scale insulin is associated with clinically significant hyperglycemia in many patients, and its use has been discouraged. Findings from the randomized trials have consistently shown better glycemic control with a basal approach than with sliding scale insulin alone in patients with type 2 diabetes. And the basal bolus approach was associated with a reduction of complication, estimated with a composite outcome that included post-operative wound healing, pneumonia, bacteremia, acute renal and respiratory failure are the various things. So insulin therapy and hypoglycemia, which has been very elaborately discussed by Dr. Sandeep, so I would not go into the detail of these slides, but we must remember that hypoglycemia is very detrimental to the patient's outcome, and we must at any cost prevent the hypoglycemia. So our target should not be 100 to 140, but we must keep the target of 140 to 180 in non-critically ill patient for avoidance of hypoglycemia. If your target are 100 to 140, then you are more vulnerable to develop hypoglycemia than in comparison to 140 to 180 milligram target per deciliter. The non-insulin drugs, they are like metformin, sulfonylureas, thiazolidine. So out of all these things, many times when it is difficult to control diabetes with the only insulin regimen, and especially in obese patients, we may use metformin. Sometimes we use a small dose of sulfonylureas also, but usually we don't use thiazolidine in acute care setting because this drug takes longer time to act and will not have its effect. SGLT2 inhibitors obviously are not used for acute care setting because of various drawbacks like euglycemic ketoacidosis, urinary tract infections, and other things. DPP4 inhibitors, they are roughly or reasonably safe, but then there are issues regarding the heart failure, so they are not good. And there are now newer studies which tells us that if patient can tolerate GLP-1 receptor agonist, you can still use GLP-1 receptor agonist. And there are various papers, especially the one with dulaglutide, has been used in the acute care setting in non-critically ill diabetic patients. So there are various trials which you can see here, and I'm not going to return this is just for the sake of mention that there are various trials which are seen here, and they tell us that the difference between the basal bolus versus premix, whether NPH and other things are seen, and from that every trial has got some message which we can, which you can see later on. In special situations, we have seen as ICU situations with parenteral nutrition, like hyperglycemia is common during parenteral and enteral nutrition, and data from a study, patients receiving parenteral nutrition suggest benefits of admixing short-acting insulin into the parenteral bag as opposed to subcutaneous insulin administration. So it is better if you calculate the calories, if you know the total daily dose, then you can add an appropriate amount of short-acting insulin in the bag, which may be more helpful in controlling the diabetes in this situation. For patients with diabetes and those without diabetes with sustained hyperglycemia on enteral nutrition also, you can think of giving basal insulin, which could be isofen or datamir or glargine, along with short-acting insulin with the boluses. And now we have very fast-acting boluses. So if you can calculate the feed with the calories of 300, 400 or 4 or 5 feeds if you give, then you can give short-acting insulins like aspart or fast-acting aspart along with the meals in this situation. So again, you know, glucocorticoid use is a very common problem, whether in a transplant patient or whether patients having collagen vascular disease or so many things where you need to use glucocorticoids or a part of chemotherapy. So these drugs produces with various mechanisms, hyperglycemia, which has been mentioned earlier, hepatic glucose output, insulin resistance, poor uptake from by the muscles, and all those things are responsible. And it has been shown that it is better to give NPH insulin before breakfast, followed by monitoring, point of care monitoring, and give boluses before lunch and dinner after monitoring the blood sugar values. So this can be of help, and we can have good glycemic control in this situation. All perioperative management, we have seen that oral anti-diabetic drugs are usually not preferred during perioperative management. In perioperative management, we have seen that whether it is a major surgery or a minor surgery, long bed rest is required, long NPO period is required, or whether patient is undergoing general anesthesia or major surgery, then you have to put those patients, especially type 2 diabetic patients, on insulin infusion therapy. Sometimes in type 1 patients, you may need to give IV glucose with insulin as a part of nutrition plus insulin coverage along with insulin, along with potassium. So perioperative management is very important, and we must keep the diabetes under control during 140, 180. Under anesthesia, at any cost, hypoglycemia should be avoided. So the probability of keeping the sugar values above 150 milligrams would be better than these things. And lastly, diabetes technology in the hospitals, which still yet to come in a very big way, but we must keep these things in mind. And these are the various algorithms and cartoons telling you that how you can control the diabetes with CGM device or glucometer with point of care glucometer and other things, which is seen here. Lastly, there are various guidelines from various society like Consensus Guidelines, Endocrine Society, ACE, Canadian, and that also has mentioned so many things in detail. So we can also think of these guidelines in management of diabetes. So in conclusion, I would say that hyperglycemia in the hospital is common, associated with poor hospital outcomes. For non-critical ill patients, insulins also remain the agent of choice for patients with severe hyperglycemia, high doses of insulin at home, type 1 diabetes, or those with steroid-induced hyperglycemia. In patients with mild to moderate hyperglycemia, the use of basal bolus approach with or without non-insulin agents might simplify the treatment regimes. The use of diabetes technology in hospital is rapidly evolving, but there is not ready yet for widespread use. The experience gained with the use of such technology in hospital setting during COVID-19 pandemic will be invaluable. Healthcare system should continue adapt and transform the patient's care of diabetes and hyperglycemia to provide cost-effective and patient-centered quality of care. And thank you very much for your patience listening. And I think this was the last lecture of the symposium. And I would say that good morning from Seattle, and thank you all for your kind listening. And I hand over the mic to the organizers for further deliberations. Thank you.